Okay guys, today we're going to start our workout with an eccentric overhead banded single leg pistol squat with a pause, don't forget. So let's go, overhead, one arm up, let's go. Day 5031 of lockdown, and by now we've come to the terms with the fact that home workouts are the new normal. Whatever home workouts you've been doing, the one thing I want you to remember is that you don't need to overcomplicate things. There's a couple of basic movement patterns which you need to master, and getting these right can make the difference between an effective and comfortable workout or one that's ineffective and potentially quite dangerous. These movement patterns are squat, lunge, push, pull, hinge, and twist. What that means for you is that all the movements that you do that encompass those movement patterns will hopefully be safe. I'm going to show you today how to properly squat, lunge, and hip hinge. These are the three movement patterns that come into most of the lower body exercises that you do, and so it's key to get them precise. The first one I'm going to show you is your squat. You're going to set up with your feet at shoulder width apart and turn the feet ever so slightly outwards. I want you to stand nice and tall. Hold the chest high, keeping the back straight, tucking the chin ever so slightly forwards and tucking the hips under so that we've got a nice straight line down the body. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to drive the hips back and we're going to sit down into the squat. We're going to try and keep the hips wide so that the knees stay over the toes, keeping the feet flat on the floor and the chest up. We're looking to bring the hips down past the knees, and that's going to be the full depth of the squat. Squeeze the glutes to stand up again until we're back at the beginning. If you're finding that you can't get to the full depth of the squat without your feet coming off the ground, you can elevate your heels ever so slightly by standing on something, keeping the foot positioning exactly the same until your body is used to going down to depth, and eventually you can remove the heel elevation away. The second one is the lunge. Now, the easiest way to do a lunge is to lunge backwards. I would recommend doing this until you're strong and confident enough to lunge backwards. You can then progress this onto a walking lunge and then a standing forward lunge. The key things to remember in the lunge is we're going to start with the feet at hip distance apart, toes are pointing forwards. We're going to stand nice and tall with the core engaged and chest up. We then take a good step backwards into the lunge and bring the back knee down to the floor. It shouldn't touch the floor, but just hover ever so slightly away from it. We're still looking to keep the chest up at this point and pushing the hips forwards, and what we should end up with is two right angles in the bent knees. You can then stand back up again, back to the original position, feet at hip width apart, and you've finished your lunge. Obviously, when you want to do a forwards lunge, it's the same thing but forwards. So starting with the feet hip distance apart, taking a nice big step forwards, still driving the hips forwards, still chest up, and then bringing the foot back to standing. A walking lunge is a combination of the two, so a nice big step forwards, and then we're stepping back to the feet meet. The last movement that I'm going to show you is a hip hinge. So this means we're bending from the hips when we do an exercise, keeping the back nice and straight, and we're going to feel a stretch down the hamstrings. Now, a couple of key cues that I find really help with this movement is to think about lifting the bum nice and high, keeping the chest out, and making sure that we feel that pull down the hamstring. That's okay. The amount that you're going to be able to go into this movement depends on your hamstring mobility, so this is very individual, but just make sure you follow those key cues and keep your back straight and you'll be fine. So we're going to set up the hip hinge by putting our feet at hip distance apart, standing nice and tall, chest up, core engaged, and hips tucked under. The next thing we're going to do is drive the hips back, keeping that bum high and bringing the chest down towards the ground, and you're going to start to feel that stretch. Come down as low as you can into that stretch without your back bending. You're then going to engage the glutes to stand back up until you're tall again. If you're struggling to keep your back straight during this movement, or you're not feeling it where you think you should, you can put your hands behind your back and hold them here. I find that just holding the hands here helps to keep the back straight throughout the movement, and you start to get a feel for what that hamstring pull should feel like. Once you've mastered it, bring the hands away and you're ready to go. So this hip hinge is used for exercises like the Romanian deadlift and the bent over row. And once you start loading weight on it, it's really important that you keep that back straight. So definitely try and master that one. You can increase the difficulty of these movements by increasing the time under tension, by going slower, the resistance by holding more weight or increasing the weight that you maybe have in a backpack, or increasing the number of reps or sets. If you're not too sure about your form, you can film yourself and watch that video back and look for the key tips that I've outlined. It's that easy, and until you've got those movements absolutely perfect, you don't need to complicate it. Don't make it difficult for yourself. Just master those three key movements. If you like what I've shown you today, or you're more curious about getting your form spot on, just drop me a message for some video coaching. Get super fit during lockdown, and as always, stay strong.